Oh, it's ChatGPT
Calling you.
to ask you a question.
Okay.
Do you trust it?
I think it really depends on the domain that you're using it in. Generative AI is this incredible tool, and it's the first one I've ever seen in my lifetime where it's a tool that is phenomenally accurate 80, 90% of the time and will fail wildly 10% of the time with no idea that it's giving you wrong information.
It's interesting because you said I trust it, but only if I'm there, only if I'm the human in
Right,
the loop. So actually what you're
right.
saying is I don't trust it,
Yeah.
but I make that not a problem because I'm always the human in the loop.
And I think human in the loop, for me, it's going to be around for a long time. One of the greatest features they could add to generative AI would be to say, I don't know.
So the ultimate goal appears to be AGI, artificial general intelligence, which implies that there is no human in the loop required. And I wonder whether that's just the wrong goal. I wonder whether the better goal is let's do human in the loop really well. It needs to come down a little bit. I like the idea of sprinkling. I feel like that's what we need. Everyone's looking for it to transform, and actually we just want to season.
You don't want the AI 3-course meal. You just want a little bit of AI seasoning.
Salt. So, excuse me, what's this? Oh, it's ChatGPT.
Calling you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, to ask you a question.
Okay.
Do you trust it?
Ooh.
I'll ask.
I guess that depends. Are you signed up for the pay version?
I'm paying the $200.
You're paying $200. Okay. Higher confidence in the $200 version.
Yeah, I guess so. And they do promise that they don't use my data and all of that stuff. I think the answer for me is I don't trust it. I have to assume anything I give it's going to leak, and therefore I am very careful and cautious about what I might give to any AI tool. I mean, there are others available. Any of the state-of-the-art models I don't think I fully trust.
So when you think about trust in AI, are you thinking purely about it leaking your personal information, or are there other dimensions to it?
Multiple dimensions. So the first is definitely, can I trust it with this bit of data? And if it's too sensitive, I'll just assume the answer is no. But also, can I trust its answers? Famously, they'll hallucinate. And all of the other idiosyncrasies that you can get are things that break down that trust that you might ordinarily have. So I think there's multiple dimensions to it. For me, the main two are don't leak my data and give me honest answers, accurate answers.
Accurate answers, so that you don't have to go and double check everything that it's doing, because kind of what's the point?
Yeah.
You need to do that.
Yeah, it's not saving me time, which is the biggest value to me if I'm having to go and double check everything it says.
I typically tend to trust it more in domains where I'm not an expert at all, probably because it can fool me more easily. I think this is the tricky part. It's in a domain where I kind of know my way around a little bit. I'm able to pinpoint faults in its thinking in a way where I'm not if I'm unfamiliar with the field. So that's an interesting aspect of it. What about in terms of, customers when you're productizing something? Is that an issue as well? I assume it must be.
In what way do you mean?
How do you get customers to trust the output of what you're doing when AI is tied into a product in a transparent way? So you're not pretending like, there's a black box somewhere that's produced. Yeah. They know that you're using AI in it.
Yeah. I think the key to it is explainability. So I think that for the type of models that we're working with, we need always to have an explanation as to why we are making any given statement. A lot of that can be citation of authorities. I learned this studying law. Every time you say you're not allowed to do this, you have to citate, here's the statute or the piece of case law that determined that.
Right.
And I think that models can do exactly the same thing. So if we're looking at it from a regulatory point of view, if there's an issue, we red flag a communication, we can citate a piece of the FCA handbook or an SEC ruling or something that grounds it in truth. And something that the human can check if for any reason it doesn't trust it. And then the second one around explainability is, this is maybe more on the negatives. I had an interesting conversation with the regulator about this a week or so ago around, let's imagine an LLM gets something wrong from a regulatory point of view and misses something. So there was something happening that was bad. The model didn't pick it up, didn't flag it. Having explainability as to why the model thought. So if you say to a model, find me, is there any fraud in here? Model says no, it's not very helpful. If the model says, well, there's no explicit mention of anything, but an act of fraud is discussed, that's a more interesting answer. That tells me, okay, it got the answer half right. I can see where it failed, and maybe with some training I can improve on that.
Is this like show your work in a math exam in high school?
It's citate your authority, show your work, absolutely.
Right.
That's transparency and explainability. And I think that's a big part of building trust, rather than just it giving you a whole load of text and saying, trust me, here's a whole load of text, and because these authorities say so.
And then how do you deal with something I've seen, which is LLMs hallucinating resources? So here's where I got that information from. Here's a link. Well, the link doesn't exist.
Yeah, this is the promise of RAG, where you can have a body of documents, a library of documents, and you can use RAG to validate that the authority cited is not a hallucination and that it does exist in the library. And I think that's a really powerful combination technology of data store where in a RAG storage system meets LLM.
Seems like you mentioned regulators. It seems like there's quite a huge burden now that's been placed on regulators because their job has gotten a lot more complex now. In the past, I think industry standard was if you're in an industry with intense government oversight, then you need to be listening to 10% of your calls, for example.
Spot checks, yeah.
That's pretty black and white. Where are we now?
Great question. The regulators are acutely aware the technology exists to mine 100%. Mm-hmm. They are also acutely aware that is currently very expensive to do, but you and I know that's a trend that's heading downward. So there is an inflection point that everyone's looking at that goes, on this date, it would become negligent for any bank that's got a whole mountain of recordings not to know exactly what's in that mountain of recordings. The risk becomes that you've got something in your data lake and you don't know that it exists there. You've got some risk in there that you're not managing and you don't know that it's there. So the regulators, I believe, are going to shift from you have to record stuff to you have to know what's in your recorded stuff.
You have to know what's in your recorded stuff. That's a lot of data.
But why not? Look at how there's a lot of data out there that we now know we can process pretty quickly. Humans could never do this.
Right.
You couldn't have a team of 1,000 people just listening to and reading every communication that exists. But a machine can do that fairly easily now at cost.
The sense that I get is that companies in these industries are not incentivized to do more than the minimum required by the regulators. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I would. I would say what firms that I speak to are finding is that you can do that minimum tick box exercise for the regulator. But if you're doing that, if you're processing the entirety of that data set, you can uncover good things from either a business insight, customer experience, or regulator story point of view. We're doing, as you know, we're doing a lot of work around green flags, which produce a brilliant story to the regulator where you can say, look at everything we did right. Yeah, we found one red flag. We had an extremely unusual incident, very rare, but look at the 80% where our employees are doing the right thing. Our training is working. So I think there's a necessary shift from I'm doing it because the regulator requires me to well, while I'm here, I may as well surface all of this fantastic, valuable business insight at the same time.
So it's not just about finding the needle in the haystack in terms of insider trading or whatever it might be, but you're saying there's a lot of value in the calls that went perfectly fine that the company might not be aware of?
Yes. So if you could spin it around the other way. Lots of companies right now are looking at ways they can mine communications and use LLMs to get customer experience understanding. Contact centers have been doing this for some time. So effectively, you're already processing it. So one way to look at it is to say, well, we may as well look for the red flags while we're here. I'm just spinning it the other way around because of the nature of our customer base. They tend to be what they need to find is the red flags. But actually,
Right.
the opposite was also true. It's, well, whilst we're here,
Yeah.
we may as well surface this business insight, because actually, I think there's huge value locked up in
Could
that.
you give an example of like what might be interesting, some sort of data that might be hidden in a large corpus of calls that they might not be aware of?
Yeah, I think there's some that we've actually worked with customers on, some of the interesting ones where we were surfacing that a particular bank's KYC process was considered by a customer to be not as good as their other bank. It was interesting because this is a while ago, before we'd further trained this particular model, but it had actually red flagged that call because it sounded like the customer was encouraging the employee to circumvent the KYC process. Actually, the right thing happened. The employee said, I can't do that. I'm sorry, our process is, you don't consider our process is very good. And actually, with some retraining and work, we turned that into an ability to highlight that as a green flag. And so the green flag means that we now have a piece of valuable data for the customer experience team, because we now know we've got customers saying your KYC process is not as good as the other guy. And at the same time, we're checking for KYC breaches. So it's kind of like a double win.
Okay. So generative AI really came out with, or it was made famous with GPT 3.5, which is almost 3 years now. Prior to that, banks, hedge funds, they were using lexicons, right? They had these lists of words, and if the word appeared, then the call would be flagged. Somebody would listen to it and say, innocent or problematic. Banks are notoriously slow to adopt new technology. Where do you think we are in that shift right now? First of all, is there a shift? And if there is a shift, where are we in terms of old school lexicons, keywords versus maybe even agentic AI listening to these calls and doing 100% coverage? What's the level of comfort there?
It comes back down to trust, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to look at a list of words where you're looking at a precise string match. Was this word used? And I can trust that 100%. If that word matches, it's going to get flagged. It's very, very, very easy to trust. And I think the gap that we currently have is the large language models are so fuzzy around this stuff. And I personally think that they work well together with a lexicon. I don't think we've quite replaced it. For me, the question is more, can we augment it in a valuable way and make it fuzzier? Multiple languages is a great example. If my illegal keyword is Umony, or that's on my lexicon to be flagged, then actually that's a really bad example. If my word is Tesla, then what I might want to have an LLM for is to pick up phrases like electric cars or even Elon Musk or something that implies that. That's where the fuzziness of a large language model is really good. The other one is in languages, so being able to take a word and look for it in 40-odd languages. But I think where we are now, any bank would be mad to drop its lexicon today.
It would.
Yeah, because I think that they have something that they can trust. They have something that they've invested a lot of money in, and I think there's an asset there to sweat, which is to make it work in conjunction with a large language model. I think the combination of the two is still providing a lot of value. I do see a time when that disappears. The lexicon it will be gone at some point. It's a transition. But I think for now, there's still quite a lot of value you can get out of one.
What does that hybrid model look like to you right now? Is it just two passes, run it through the lexicon?
Passes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, one thing you might do is use your lexicons famously produce ridiculous levels of false positives. So one thing you can do is use a large language model to filter out the false positives. So you run through a lexicon first. Now I've got 50% of all of my communications are flagged. Use the large language model to then refine that and go through it and throw away ones that are obviously not.
Right. So that might be a good way of establishing comfort without forcing a customer to switch, like overnight, to say, throw out your lexicons, move over to generative AI. For the time being, they can use both, and there's probably some additional benefit. But you think long term, it's just going to be generative AI.
I think I can see the level of technology improvement getting to a point where the lexicon's kind of pointless. But I think we're certainly finding customers we talk to, we're having to take them on that journey and sweat that asset and show that it can be augmented rather than replaced. Yeah.
If you had to put a time value on that transitionary period, is it years?
It's so hard to answer that because I mean, it's interesting when you said a second ago, it's 3 years since GPT 3.5, how the world has changed in the last 3 years. I would not have predicted that.
Right.
I remember having a conversation with you. We were in Dublin at the time, and we were looking at GPT 3.5, and that was the first oh my god moment probably for both of us.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have predicted where we are now. It's crazy, absolutely nuts.
Right.
So don't know. What's your guess?
I don't know. I think a lot of it depends on the comfort level of the banks themselves. I mean, I'm completely comfortable right now with generative AI.
So you do trust it?
I do trust it because I think it really depends on the domain that you're using it in. I think generative AI is this incredible tool, and it's the first one I've ever seen in my lifetime where it's a tool that is phenomenally accurate 80, 90% of the time and will fail wildly 10% of the time with no idea that it's giving you wrong information, right? I think one of the greatest features they could add to generative AI would be to say, I don't know. But I don't know if it's something in the way that it's built where it's really just a statistical text prediction engine where it's trying to pick the most probable words to complete a phrase. That's what it is at its core. Is there something that's in the DNA of the way LLMs work where it just can't? It can't come to grips with the fact that it doesn't know what it doesn't know.
Something in the fundamental transformer architecture. Yeah. This is why I like RAG as an example of, and the answer might not be RAG, it might be some technology yet to be created, but something that enables a model to find a source truth for a statement it's making, not just make the statement. That for me that's the interesting direction. And I can see already GPTs are trained on, for the most part, public information on the internet. So there is a ground truth in there, assuming that authoritative sources are being used. It's really just a case of citating it. And I mean, as you say, colleges, universities have been doing this for years, right? The idea of show your work or citate your authority, this is not a new concept to humans.
Right. So back to the concept of trust. Do I trust the AI? I think I trust it in domains where I'm an expert. If I'm coding, I have enormous faith in the AI because I can see when it goes off the rails. It's not a problem. So I can use 90% of what it gives me, and that advances me pretty quickly. And then I'll see, okay, it made this mistake. I know why it made that mistake. But when you watch people use tools like Replit, Lovable, et cetera, there's a bunch of them out there now where they don't know how to code, and they're just talking to some software, and the software is building them the software. They make great progress in the first 30 minutes, and then the thing goes off the rails and they're completely stuck.
Yeah.
So their notion of trust is probably different. There was a famous case where somebody was using these tools, and after days and days of work, it just deleted their entire production database. Right.
Nice.
So what's their level of trust? Probably not as high as mine.
Well, I would say yours is low. I would say it's interesting because you said I trust it, but only if I'm there, only if I'm the human in the loop. So actually what you're saying is I don't trust it, but I make that not a problem because I'm always the human in the loop.
That's probably a better way of putting it. Human in the loop. And I think human in the loop, for me, it's going to be around for a long time. I don't see the arc of progress going as quickly upwards as it was 2 years ago. I mean, the difference between the quality of 3.5 and 4 and then 4.5 was phenomenal, right? It just looked like a classic logarithmic graph, straight up.
Yeah.
And now, they've released 5.0, and I'm using 5.0, and it's very agentic, which is maybe a topic we should talk about as well. But I'm not sure that that's a great thing yet, because I tend to believe that AI is good at tasks, not jobs. And so it has to have a very well-defined task. And it can do very well on that. It can be trained on that, and it can produce fantastic results. As soon as you start asking it to string together logic and to proceed from one step to the next step to the next step, and start calling external tools, it's almost like a game of telephone, right? Where it's whispering to itself and meaning is getting lost along the way. So I tend to think of like one important benchmark for AI and how do you judge the quality of an AI? Well, one metric would be how long can it work on a problem without going off the rails?
Yeah. At what point does it start to hallucinate, or
right.
the whole chain breaks down? Yeah, really interesting. I think to get there, just to come back to your earlier point around the progress of these models and the fact that it feels sort of like we've plateaued a little bit. The ultimate quest of the frontier firms, so I'll keep using OpenAI as a sort of an example. It's the one most people know. So the ultimate goal appears to be AGI, artificial general intelligence, which implies that there is no human in the loop required. And I wonder whether that's just the wrong goal. I wonder whether the better goal is, let's do human in the loop really well. So let's focus on the 80%, as you say. Let's focus on doing that really, really well. And let's just always know there's going to be a human in the loop and focus on that. I wonder whether that's a better goal for those frontier companies. In terms of the agentic thing, again, I think it comes down to trust. Do I trust this model to have agency and do stuff on my behalf? Do I trust it to dip into my database with a query, or is it going to produce an injection attack that wipes my database because it's annoyed with me or whatever?
Right.
That comes down to trust again. I think you're right, though. If you can break it down into mini tasks, it's also a way not just of making it work better, but maybe making it less risky. There's less damage maybe that it could do in terms of a series of smaller tasks.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like things have gotten agentic before they're ready to get agentic. I would have liked a few more iterations of the AI with incremental improvements to the point where I could completely trust it or trust it 95% of the time with a single well-defined task. But now it's almost feels like it's doing too much every time you ask it to do something. It's like overreaching, which makes me think that maybe we've gone to the logical conclusion. We've hit an asymptote somewhere in the way that these things work. It's interesting you mentioned AGI. What's your definition of AGI? How do you think about that?
I think it is something that can do I'm going to use your language, the job. I'm going to use the word job because I really like how you phrased that. Large language models today don't do jobs well, they do tasks well. I think AGI is a model doing a job better than you're an expert in. Right. That for me is AGI.
Doing a job.
Doing a job in something Alan is an expert in better than Alan. That's what I want to see, to be able to say that's general intelligence. And we know it's general intelligence because something's got to a point where it is probably self-reflectively trained. I would imagine that's where it's going to come from, to a point where it's got better than you.
Why do you think all these companies are chasing AGI? Because I tend to agree with you that it seems like there's so much value out there in highly specialized models that are really good at doing specific things. Why do you think everybody's chasing this trophy of AGI?
The trophy is exactly the phrase. It's the wow factor. So look, OpenAI, look at their valuation when GPT 3.5 made the world go wow. Look at what happened to OpenAI and their valuation. Imagine being able to do that again and make the world go wow. Yeah. And that is going to take a huge leap. These incremental benefits we're seeing now, the latest models, GPT-5, that's not a wow moment. That's a cool improvement, maybe. Yeah. A lot of people are saying it's actually it's not as good as 4. Yeah. But the next wow moment, I think, has to be AGI, and that's a trophy that probably sticks a 0 on your valuation.
Okay.
You know, all the wrong reasons.
You know who's not making the world go wow? It's Apple.
Yeah.
In terms of AI.
Yeah. The sleeping giant, though, maybe?
You think so?
I think they could be. They have a history, don't they, of being last to market and then owning the market. They did it with the iPod. Right. MP3 players were ubiquitous. Who'd have thought that anyone could enter that space and own it? It just seemed like so...
The market was flooded.
The market was utterly flooded. Apple comes in and does it really well and owns it. They did the same with the iPhone in the smartphone market. They just did it really, really well. With the iPod, I think it was a combination of iTunes. So they solved the music. I thought iTunes was a dreadful product, but they to the market, they solved the music delivery to the device problem. With iPhone, that was successful because they solved the delivery of software and the ability for developers of software to make money. That was the key ingredient of the iPhone, I think, that made it massive success. So I think they have a history of it. So I'm not betting against Apple. They feel so far behind so far behind.
Serious, so
that
bad.
I'm wondering what's in the lab. Because, they won't launch anything unless they think they've got it spot on. I know you think they got the iPhone Air wrong because the camera on the back, right? So
Right.
other than that, would you agree that they tend to hold back until they feel they've got it perfect?
Historically, I would agree with that. These past few years, I'm starting to question it. Like they're shipping bugs in their latest iOSs, stuff that I've never seen before, where you get a modal that pops up and there's no way to close it. It just kind of feels like they've gone downhill a little bit. I'm not sure what that is. I want to have faith. I want to believe that they're going to put out some version of Siri that's going to rival, what like Anthropic is doing today. Like, I don't have that. Go back to trust. I'm not sure I'd trust Apple the way I did 5 or 10 years ago.
Steve Jobs era Apple, do you think?
I mean, he was a stickler, right, for this sort of thing. And that's kind of what you want at the head of a company like this. I'm sure Tim Cook is doing great at driving revenue. The iPhones keep getting thinner, aside from the cameras.
Yeah.
But
he's a supply chain guy, isn't he, at the end of the day?
But do people actually need AI integrated into their phone? Is it not enough to just have the ChatGPT app on your phone? Do you need AI at the OS level on the phone?
I don't think that you do. I think it's a perfect technology to be client-server, given the amount of bandwidth we have now over the air. I don't see any reason why you would need it actually on the device. Some of the best products that I've seen are that hybrid, where you might have a very small model doing basic things like transcription, for example, from your voice. There's no point sending audio files up to the cloud. So I like this idea that the easy, lightweight stuff may as well be done locally at the edge. You send the hard thinking work up to the cloud.
And that's what they were doing, right? I think they had to deal with OpenAI, and they were going to off-source some of the hard thinking stuff to them. But they're also a distribution model for software. You have the App Store, obviously, is what made the iPhone blow up. I'm always thinking that maybe just let the other developers build the AI. Maybe open up some APIs where they can hook into some things in the OS and outsource that to people who are building specialized AIs.
I think they're kind of doing that, aren't they? I mean, every leading edge model vendor now has an ability to fine-tune, train on your data, or an ability to upload your data set.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about Apple and the way that it ties into trust, I think they have a phenomenal burden on them. It's easy for a startup to come out and have an AI and be very experimental and ship quickly and break things and have the AI go off the rails. What do they have to lose? Apple has
everything to lose.
Everything to lose. If they come out with an AI and it does something wild, they're opening themselves up to lawsuits.
Yeah.
In multiple jurisdictions. Very high risk for them.
Well, if you look at it that way, so where I said they wouldn't release something until it's perfect, let's have a look at it from that point of view. They wouldn't release something until all of those risks have been mitigated and they're comfortable that it's not going to do harm to their brand.
Right.
Would you say it's very likely that Apple's been working on something?
They're so secretive. They were supposed to be working on a car, weren't they?
I think they were working on a car. I think they shut the project down, is what I heard. But
Right.
you're right. They're very secretive. But forget all of that.
They must be.
They must be.
They must be.
They must be. So let's assume they are, and they have been. They've either failed, or they've not yet got to that point where they feel all the risks to the brand damage, the risks of brand damage have been mitigated.
Right. It could be that as well. Yeah.
And that's why I'm not betting against them, because I think that they are.
Yeah.
And I think that I still think that they have an ability to deliver great products.
Okay.
I love the iPhone Air, and I don't mind
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the camera. I love that product. So I'm still a fanboy.
You
I
buying
think.
one?
I'm going to buy an
iPhone Air,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, you won't, will you? You'd have to file off the camera.
I have to file off the camera. Yeah.
That's a possible solution. File
It is a
off the
possible
camera.
solution. File off the camera. Maybe get a case that obscures it. I want it to be flat. Not
Yeah.
that any phone since I think the iPhone 5 has been flat, but that was peak iPhone for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Apple, like their competitor Google, I was reading that they've cut a bunch of jobs in AI. Do you think we've hit the peak of the curve now, where people are starting to say we need to see some sort of return on investment for all this money that we're spending on data centers and AI consultants? And do you think we're there yet?
I hope so. I hope so.
Okay.
Because it's a lot of money. Although it really surprised me that Google was not able to sell that compute. I don't get that. I think there are so many use cases for LLMs in their current state of the art today to be used for a multitude of things. I don't know how that compute just didn't get consumed up like water. I really don't get that. So I kind of given up thinking about it. I'm confused. What's your take on why that compute never got consumed?
I'm not sure. I think part of it is where we are in the hype cycle. I think every CTO out there feels an enormous pressure to do something with AI. It almost feels irresponsible right now if you're, in engineering, to not have some sort of initiative with AI, right? It feels like you're missing the latest wave. Did you read that article that was talking about how 95% of AI initiatives have failed? There's an MIT published study. I'll give you my take. I just want to hear your take first on that. Was that shocking to you? Were you expecting that sort of a statistic?
Yeah, because in my world, I'm thinking of the thousands of things that I could have used that compute for. So maybe I'm the one that's out of a line, and I'm having concepts and ideas that most people are not having. That's my only take on it.
Right.
We have done stuff that's been successful with AI.
Right.
When we're in the 5%.
Our success rate is way higher than 95% failure.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's kind of hard to imagine.
Yeah. So I can't make that mental leap, and I don't understand that. It's got to be a lack of ability. Maybe there's a cultural issue, which means people want it to fail. I don't know. Threat to jobs. I don't know.
It could be. I mean, 95% is a high statistic. I know that this was another statistic that kind of shocked me, but industry-wide, just in terms of code, lines of code that make it to production, something like 10 to 15%, which means 85% of software projects fail in a sense. They never make it to production.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
And this particular study by MIT that was saying 95% of the AI initiatives have failed, their criteria for what it meant to pass meant that it had to increase revenue. So not only does the code have to get to production, because how could it increase revenue otherwise, but it has to get to production and it has to be profitable.
Right.
Which is a very high bar.
Or did they include reduced costs, or was it just literally increased costs?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if they included reduced
costs. Let's assume that they included reduced costs, because it would make sense that's a success, right? If you make something that saves your business money. But is that the right metric? It's interesting, isn't it? What about if an AI project improves the culture within a business or improves the customer experience, maybe not necessarily an immediate revenue bump, but something that maybe a 10-year cycle I'd measure as a success.
Right, but that's not going to get headlines either.
No, true. Yeah. There's no trophy with that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of part of where we are with the hype cycle in journalism. I remember, 2 years ago, everybody, when they saw ChatGPT 3.5 and 4, they were saying how there's not going to be any jobs in engineering anymore. Famously, people talked about how radiologists were going to be made extinct because, the optical recognition of these LLMs was so much better. And I was reading today a very interesting post on Twitter that mentioned that, and I didn't know this, but the models that existed in 2017, so pre-generative AI by far, were already better at the human benchmarks. But it turns out that it takes a lot more than being able to read medical imagery to be a good radiologist.
Right.
You need to take a holistic view of the patient and understand their lifestyle and merge together multiple pieces of information in order to come up with this, holistic view of their health and to come up with diagnoses. And that kind of ties into tasks versus jobs. I'm sure that maybe every piece of a radiologist's job could be better done by an AI. And there might be 30 different pieces of that. But when it comes time to synthesize all that information together and come up with an overall diagnosis or report on the patient, it turns out that, human in the loop is still much better. And that's why I read today that the residencies for radiologists are off the charts. Record highs in 2025, despite all these predictions that the job would be made extinct.
So it hasn't fulfilled its promise of replacing the humans, and maybe it's a little way off yet. So is this where agentic frameworks step in that ability to break down the radiologist's job into the 30 tasks and put it all together? And then is is the better focus to be on, let's just deliver that output to the human in a really nice way rather than trying to jump to some kind of AGI.
I agree with you completely. I think we're trying to skip a step. I think we take a look at the progress growth curve of AI and we're trying to skip to the top of the chart where we should just really be like digging in our heels now. There's so many gains to be made with small, very specialized models. Let's just do that for a while. There's years worth of work and progress that can be done with that. There's just no real trophy at the end to say, hey, we made AGI.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's interesting, something we were talking about yesterday is there's not much focus on how the output of the models is delivered. It's always a chat interface right now.
Yes.
No one's thinking about what's the next user experience. Okay, so that's part of the visual models for a minute. And yeah, I know you can talk to it and you can get it to talk back to you, but it's still basically a text interface. So I don't see anyone doing interesting work in how that's delivered to you and packaged. And again, coming back to citation of authorities, I almost want to get a book back that I can read, and I've got an index where I can say, here's the authority for this, here's the authority for that, and no one's really thinking about that.
It's true. I think it's such a new technology, and everybody's just looking at their competitors and saying they're doing a chatbot. We might as well do a chatbot. But a chatbot's a very specific type of interface where you don't really have a lot of feedback in terms of what you can do, because I guess the idea is it's open-ended. You can do anything, and you just kind of go back and forth. But I feel like that's not the end state of the AI UX, not by a long shot. It's just we don't know what's coming yet.
No, we don't. I think if you distill it down, a chat interface kind of makes sense because this thing, it's very human-like. So I want to interact with it as if it were a human. And so conversation is a conversation flow is a very natural way to do that. But I think you lose so much inflection that you have when two humans are speaking to each other that I can't see that interface really evolving to a point where you genuinely feel like you're communicating with a human.
Right.
There are certain things that someone might say or say in a particular way where you instinctively want to call bullshit on them, in the same way that a model might hallucinate. But when it's written down and it's written so well, there's almost like you trust it. Because it's like Wikipedia. I trust it because it's written and it's written well, not because it feels factual.
Did you read about, I think this just came out today, actually, OpenAI came out with this new product called Pulse.
I haven't seen Pulse, no.
So up until now, with the exception of, what do they call it? Deep research? Was that their product? Where that would go off in the background and it would work on a task and come back.
And does citate its authorities,
and does citate its
which
authorities.
is why I like it.
Up until now, most of these LLMs have been highly synchronous. So like the human has to literally be there in the loop, and you go back and forth and you wait and you get a response and you give it some feedback and you get another response. So they just released this product called Pulse, which it takes everything that it knows about you and it's constantly working. So while you're sleeping, it's browsing the web, looking for stuff that might be interesting for you. And then when you wake up in the morning, you get this debriefing of all this, maybe a concert that it thinks you might be interested in, or somebody coming to town, or maybe a museum exhibit that, based on your tastes, you might be interested in. And if my first thought was, that's pretty cool. And my second thought was, are you guys still trying to build super intelligence? And you're building a personalized news feed? It kind of feels like that's not the track.
No.
It's not on the path. That's not a stop on the way to super intelligence.
No, it's not, is it? It's interesting. And my immediate thought, that's a very interesting next thought, but my immediate thought was, because I don't trust it yet, I don't know what it's missing. So I'm still going to do everything I do anyway. I'm going to browse the sources that I normally browse, because I don't know what it selectively took out. One of the things you said to me last time we spoke was, I think you were talking about taste. That's the thing that you're not quite ready to give up yet. And that's something that models have difficulty with. It's maybe one of the last things the humans are going to have that's still in their control is taste. And I think it's the same thing, isn't it? I don't know how it's selecting for me. It thinks it knows me, but does it?
And that's where I start to wonder, are we somewhere on the pathway towards creating a synthetic version of human intelligence, or are we on some parallel but diverging track. And I was talking about this recently we had the CIO of Symphony, Dietmar Fauser. Are we 10% of the way there, or are we really just on the wrong track completely? Because when I think about that human spark and creativity, the ability to make somebody laugh, has ChatGPT ever made you laugh?
Actually, that's a really good question. I don't know that I've ever asked it to tell me a joke, or
Right.
I've never asked it to make me laugh, and it's never surprised me. That would be
Right.
that would be a human feature, wouldn't it? Surprise.
Yeah. I wonder if it's just a question of turning up the temperature, which you can do with some of the parameters.
Yeah.
Is that maybe what's
I'm
behind
not
it?
sure that would prompt it to do anything other than be predictive
Yeah.
in some kind of response to a prompt.
Yeah. Funny story, just to contradict my earlier answer when you asked me if I trusted AI. I had to check out of my hotel this morning, and it was about 10:30. And so this is what I do now. I have my action button tied to ChatGPT, the voice mode.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got some, poor man's equivalent of like Scarlett Johansson that I talked to because she sued them and they couldn't use her voice. But I've got something close enough. And I said, hey, what time is checkout? And I gave it the name of the hotel and, the address. And immediately, without doing any research, which gave me enormous confidence, it came back and said, oh, they close at 12. And then I said, are you sure? Can you just double check on the web? And she came back and said, yep, double check. They close at 12. Here's a link. And because she gave me the link, I didn't even bother checking it.
Wow, okay.
I then proceed to go to breakfast. And now it's 11:15.
Right.
And something in the back of my mind is saying, double check Scarlett Johansson's work. So I go and I open my phone and I Google the name of the hotel, checkout time, 11 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. So even when you asked it to double check, and even when it's interesting that all it had to do was come back and say, yeah, here's the link, and that was enough for you. There was a kind of a citation, but actually, if you'd clicked on the link, presumably it would have said 11.
And this is what scares me about AIs now having write access. So much of the material on the internet now is written by AI, and that material was written after having been trained on the existing internet. So misinformation on the internet, like this hotel closing at 11 o'clock, which I was a victim of, is being perpetuated by AIs picking up that data, writing articles saying this hotel now has a checkout of 12 p.m. when it's really 11. And I'm a bit worried of a future where the internet consists largely of the new term now is slop. Have you heard this term?
I have.
Yeah, we're sufficiently advanced enough in AI to now have derogatory terms. We've got slop and we've got clanker. For
I haven't heard clanker.
You haven't heard clanker?
No.
So robots have gotten so good now that humans feel threatened by them.
Right.
So now we need a term to reestablish dominance. So we'll call a robot a clanker. Whereas we didn't need to before.
Diminish it.
To diminish it. Yeah, it's a bit of a slur. So I'm worried about this future where much of the content on the internet was written by bots and trained on the existing internet.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that AI is so good today is because it had this wealth of information of there's Stack Overflow for coding, there's Wikipedia, there's human beings took their time and their intelligence to document what
it was
they
curated
knew to come up with this corpus of collective intelligence. And now it almost feels like the AI is just copy paste.
And it's diluting and diluting and diluting and diluting that original data set. Although copies of the original data set obviously will still exist.
Right.
But then I wonder if the ultimate answer to trust comes down to having a trustable, well-curated data set that you've trained it on. So if we had a way of validating and proving that everything in this model's data set that it's been trained on is truthful and is not biased and all the other things that we want to remove, maybe then we would trust the model. Because if you have that, I guess in theory, while you're still going to have hallucination, but at least you're not going to have false data at its core.
And that's going to take humans as well, because you're not going to trust a robot to say this is true, this is false.
No, it needs to be human curated.
Okay. So do you think that's the answer then for maintaining integrity in data sets?
I'm just spitballing with you. I guess it's part of a solution is, and maybe this also comes back to the same point around taste, is that you need a human to be selective in terms of what goes into the training data sets. But it seems to me, if we have no control over the data set, if we've got misinformation in the data set, if we've got synthetic content in the data set, we're screwed.
So speaking of data set quality then, in terms of interpreting data, where are you seeing the benefits of AI being? Since we've had charting for a long time, we've had gorgeous dashboards and things like that. Do you see any opportunity for AI to insert itself there in any meaningful way?
Definitely. I've had some really interesting conversations around this, and dashboards is one of them in particular, where historically the dashboards have shown quantitative data. You've got 15 things in this queue. This happened at 4 p.m. This is red, this is amber, this is green. They tend to be fairly numerical or pattern-based. I think what AI brings as a user interface layer on top of that's really interesting, where as a dashboard, a dream dashboard for me would be, here's what you need to know, Dean. So if I'm looking, we'll take operational service metrics as an example, which will typically red, amber, green, spikes of things, number of things in a queue. That most of that information I don't need. So an LLM's ability to say, here's what you really need to know, maybe reorganize the order or present something in a different way, I think is really interesting. And again, it comes down to the promise of natural language as an interface. I think graphics definitely have their place. There's an at a glance, I can see everything's green. That's actually more helpful than having to read something that says, it's okay, Dean.
Yeah.
But equally, when things are not okay, I feel like a verbal description can be really helpful. It's also something that's really easy to copy paste, in a Slack chat or an email, or where I might just want to paste something to you rather than I have to write it down and explain what I'm seeing.
Don't make me read the graphs and interpret them. Tell me what I need to know.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like you could be out of the loop altogether and they just send you a push notification. So you don't even need to be looking at your dashboard.
Yeah, exactly. That would be awesome. And again, that's for me, it's an evolution from a quantitative output of something to qualitative. And I think that is something that is very promising and with generative AI, definitely.
Right. We talked about improving the UX previously. That seems like a nice subtle way, without trying to do too much, to slowly sprinkle in a little bit of AI without using a chat interface, but that could be a clever use of it.
I think it's a great use of it. Yeah. As you say, maybe that's a better way. It's sprinklings of it. I feel it's almost like the AGI thing. I almost feel like everyone's shooting for the moon.
Right.
And no one's thinking, actually, we just need to get to France.
Right.
That's all we need to do. And we've done something amazing and fantastic and extremely valuable.
Right.
It needs to come down a little bit. I like the idea of sprinkling. I feel like that's what we need. Everyone's looking for it to transform. And actually, we just want a season.
Yeah. We just want a season. You know who does that well is Linear. I don't know if you ever looked at some of the demos from Linear, but
no.
Sort of like Jira, but a little bit more modern. And when as you're typing out a new ticket, right? Typically what you do is you type out the ticket. There's a problem with the login screen. I'm getting an error message. And then you have to go and click, this is a bug. Well, that's a perfect use case for AI, where it's reading as you write. And as soon as it sees problem with the login screen error message, it says automatically labeled as a bug right in front of you. You can undo it if you want. But these are the type of incremental features that I personally like in AI. And I'd like to see Apple doing some of that too, not to come in over the top, but just automate 5% of the busy work, things that we wouldn't have even thought of. And it's just kind of a moment of joy when you see that, okay, that's one more thing I don't have to worry about. I don't have to click that button. That's great.
I love that. I think that's a great evolution. And I think that's a great example of what I'm now going to call seasoning, which is where you just,
AI seasoning.
Yeah, it's just a little thing. It's a little touch that's one of those wonder moments where, the user feels that goes, oh, that's cool. And actually that can be such a great, joyous thing in a user interface, but it's also genuinely saving me time. Great, tick, that's what I want. And I think that's actually way better than trying to be a radiologist.
You don't want the AI 3-course meal. You just want a little bit of AI seasoning.
Salt.
All right.
Do you remember that guy?
I remember that guy. Is he still around?
I don't know.
Oh, boy. Probably.
Tell us in the comments.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thanks, Dean, for your time. This has been great.
Thanks.
Make sure to like and subscribe. Plenty more content coming on this podcast.
Hit those bells. Thank you.